Hello, my name is Matthew Morrison, and I chose to do my presentation on adapting to climate change, with specific concentration on our wonderful home state of California. I'll be focusing on directions we must take in order to successfully do it. There are many aspects to look at when it comes to adapting to climate change, and I realize I most likely will only be able to scratch the surface, so let me first explain why I chose this topic and tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in the heart of the Central Valley in Escalon, California, which is a small agriculturally based town of about 12,000 people. I actually grew up on my grandmother's ranch that had been family owned and operated for about 100 years. It had been previously laid out in grapes, later in corn, and now to this day it's actually 100% almond orchards of several different varieties. Having the ability to irrigate the land that provides the means for my family's livelihood was and continues to be imperative. And I still feel a deep connection to that, even though I've since moved to the Bay Area. This brings me to the number one issue that I'll be focusing on for my presentation of climate change and adapting to it, and that's of water management. As we all know, California has been in a pretty bad drought for a few years, and with continued climate change, it looks as if it's not immediately going to reverse, and will most likely get worse before anything gets better. More and more evidence piles on that the Sierra snowpack that serves to feed the largest portion of our state, as well as the incredibly important agricultural center, is shrinking year after year. The amount of agricultural diversity grown in California dwarfs anywhere else in the nation and provides produce and resources for a huge portion of the rest of the country, and is even exported to other nations. The good news is that the state of California has several tools for adapting and can even limit the threat of continued climate change through better practices in water management. Water management in California actually covers a lot of different activities, whether that is water delivery to actual farmers or even local communities, which is what we most commonly think of. Also things such as water quality protection for fresh and wastewater, or even generating electricity through hydroelectric dams and the upkeep and monitoring of dams and reservoirs and levees. These processes are all taken care of by a mixture of multiple state, county, local, and even federal organizations. The huge amount of diversity in the organizations in reality can be a double-edged sword. That allows for a great amount of innovation when facing water management challenges, but also greatly hurts the ability of those different organizations to work together as a cohesive unit. One issue, for example, that's been a hot topic in these most recent years is that of groundwater use and overdrawing of groundwater. California is really in its infancy in regulating the use of groundwater and in metering how much anyone can draw out. Up until recent years, the state has relied on a stable and large amount of springtime Sierra runoff for irrigation and never paid enough attention to setting standards for the drawing of groundwater. With the drought that we're currently experiencing, we're seeing a huge increase in the amount of groundwater being pumped out. A recent Stanford study actually reported that we're now pumping 60% of the state's water needs, up from 40% when we have normal amounts of rain and snowfall. It should be said that the majority of the groundwater that is pumped out of California is actually pretty much irreplaceable. Basically, groundwater is pumped out of aquifers, which are essentially sand and gravel filled underground reservoirs. Most of our aquifers can't really be replenished with surface water. Many are actually trapped underneath bedrock or too deep for surface water to actually replenish the water that we pump out. If something isn't done to make us a little more proactive on how we get our water, we're really setting ourselves up for disaster in the near future. One thing that definitely has to change is how California regulates its groundwater. For a classically progressive state, we really have fallen behind in this key area, as many other drought-stricken states have implemented statewide policies limiting groundwater use. As recently as this last August, state legislatures have begun the process for a measure to limit and regulate its use, but the compliance plans wouldn't be required until 2020, and full implementation plans wouldn't be required for another 20 years after that. To me, even if this passes, it would seem to be too little too late. It's almost as if legislatures plan to yell fire after they've already watched their house burn down. I honestly feel more has to be done right now, not 5 to 25 years from now. The geologic record in California has actually shown that we've gone through multiple long periods of sustained drought in many times in our past, some lasting more than a century, without any occasional wet periods. If the impact we face from climate change is actually not warming, but instead a long-term drought, the ways in which we adapt are going to be a primary concern. One of those adaptations will most likely be how we make our power. If a lot of water is being pumped, or a lot of water is not being pumped through hydroelectric dams because of the restricted flow, we will most likely need to move to more suitable means, like wider use of solar and wind farming. As solar technology advances, its costs are going down, and it's increasingly becoming more profitable and feasible venture. Wind farming has been a popular way to make electricity for decades, but is typically more restrictive as it has to be set up in certain geographic areas, such as places that get a lot of wind, like the Altamont Hills. Another adaptation that we will most likely have to invest in is going to be desalinization. Desalinization is the process of converting salt water into fresh water, and has been historically a costly option, both financially as well as in the energy requirement for the process. It's typically only been an option during harsh drought years for seaside communities, and basically has been abandoned once other options are available. I feel that more research and development needs to be placed into this adaptation strategy, as continued work in this will be needed to bring its costs down. Lastly, one other topic that I would like to cover is that of sea level rise brought on by climate change and flood management. The California River Delta is a massive expanse that provides habitat for a large number of animals, as well as agricultural diversity. It's one area that is going to be threatened by sea level rise. As sea levels rise, our levees are also threatened, and with it, our increased risk of flooding to low-lying areas. We're going to have to retrofit current structures as well as new construction of other threatened areas. It's going to be a necessity for us to adapt to our changing environment. It's really unclear how severe and how quickly climate change is going to affect us, but a couple of things are typically agreed upon, and that is our environment is changing and that we must successfully change with it. As I stated at the beginning of this presentation, I know this truly only scratches the surface on the numerous issues related to adapting to our changing environment, but I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you for watching.